How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest. Today, I am joined by a strength coach for women. Today, I'm joined by the one and only Alexandra Bernardin. How are you doing?
Good. How about you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm
No,
excited.
no, me too. No problem at all. I suppose the first question, though, Alexandra, how are you? What's kind of been happening in your world recently?
Well, in my world recently, I've been transitioning I've left Kilo Strength Society to start my own endeavor. So I'm building up my online brand and, who I've always trained a lot of women, but now I'm kind of focused a little bit more on that. They say with social media, you need to like pick a niche and then kind of really go for that. Although I've trained, men and women, but I'm trying to focus a little bit more on women because that's been my experience for the last like almost 30 years.
Yeah. Oh, nice. And how are you finding, how have you kind of found that, transition and kind of doing doing your own thing really?
It's a learning curve. There's a lot of things that, when you're a team, like, each person has their thing that they're really good at. But now, like on my own, I just have to figure it out and learn new things. And it's always good to learn new things. Like I just have to be a little patient with myself and not to be too hard on myself when I can't figure things out. But I always, you always do. There's the
Yeah.
internet, there's AI AI makes a huge difference. Like I don't think 10 years ago, if I was trying to do all this like on my own, I don't think I would have been able to do it. But you can I have multiple AI assistants to help me like work through problems and learn like skills to do those things. So it's
Yeah.
been good.
It's
Yeah.
I know for me from I can relate to that from leaving the gym that I was in the UK. There was a couple of months where it was just me. My partner was obviously at work, and I kind of had to figure it out myself. But when you're saying there about AI, it's like having a PA who you can't see, which is quite helpful. Now. I did quite a brief introduction or a very short introduction at the start. Obviously, you've mentioned there about the work that you did with Kilo for a long time. But for everyone listening who might not know your background in coaching, education, to basically get to the point where you're at now, for everyone listening, just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself, Alexandra.
Yes. I started in the fitness industry like in the 90s. You see all these memes about like in the 90s, you must be ancient. I'm divulging my age. I started off I was 15 when I started coaching. I was coaching gymnastics. I was a gymnast. And I've always enjoyed coaching people, obviously. So I started with like kids and then to be even better with coaching, I decided for my degree that I would study nutrition because as a gymnastics coach, you don't get a whole lot of education on nutrition. So then I got my nutrition degree, and then I got my kinesiology degree, so like education, fitness education. And then I realized that gymnastics coaching, like you you kind of work like in the evenings and on weekends. I was like, so it's really what made me kind of pivot. And I'm like, maybe I should start like training people in the gym. Like I have the background, I have like, and then I also got into um, fitness competitions.
Yeah.
So I think that's where I really got introduced to weight training because I never did weight training before. And then once I got into that, I was like, oh well, I can do personal training. So from there, I worked in a commercial gym. It was like one of the highest end gyms in Montreal at the time. And I got just a lot of time on the floor, just like learning how to train people, learning how to get clients. That's where I met Stéphane Cazot. And he's the one who introduced me to like Charles Poliquin and that world, and who started doing continuing education and stuff. So I was there for about Yeah, I was there for 7 years. Did some really, I met some cool people there too, and then moved to St. Louis to start working for this facility that was owned by a chiropractor, but he worked with a lot of athletes. And that's where I got even more, experience. That's where I trained a lot of the athletes, like wives and like the CEOs' wives, and that's where I got a lot of experience training women at all different stages of life. But I also got like some really cool experience, like dealing with pro athletes and, going to like training camp and evaluating them and doing all this stuff. And from there, I moved to Rhode Island and was hired by Charles Poliquin, and that's where I started teaching, the PICP method, traveling all over the world, doing all that stuff. Got to meet again some really cool people, some really great strength coaches. I've been surrounded by great strength coaches like since the beginning of my career. And then from there, Steph Kelsey and we decided to start Kilo Strength Society, moved to California. And then that's where I started my experience with small group coaching, which I'd never done. Like I've always done one-on-one training. And, we created the primate system, like how to do group coaching and not have it be boot camp, which is like all the group coaching is always like boot camp type of stuff. But we really created like a cool thing where it was like all weight training. The kilo system was obviously started from there. And yeah, and then we moved to Florida, where we then focused on education, where we weren't doing the group coaching anymore. And now, as things move forward, like Kilo's transforming again, now it's becoming more remote. Like people think that just because the gym is not going to be there anymore, Kilo is like, oh, Kilo's going away. It's not going away. It's just going to be more online stuff, and then them traveling. And then that's where I decided that this was a good move for me to kind of get back into coaching. I really missed the coaching over the last 5 years where I wasn't, I had one client or two clients, maybe once here and there, but I really missed that interaction with people and, really impacting their lives in terms of training and nutrition and all that stuff. So yeah, that's kind of been my journey. So now it's like, they say you need to reinvent yourself every 5 to 7 years. So I think I've
Yeah.
been on track with that. Every 5 to 7 years, something big changes. So
Yeah.
I'm excited about to see what's going to happen
Oh,
in my
cool. And
field.
with that as well, obviously you said from coaching from doing gymnastics, and this might be a little bit of a tangent, but especially kind of going full circle because again I can kind of relate as well. My last role back in the UK, I did coach development, so worked across two gyms and was kind of like bringing the training the new coaches and trainers that were coming in and continue developing with the other coaches. Whereas now that
Yeah.
I've moved to Titan, I'm back doing classes, small
Oh, so
group
it's the
training,
same.
PT,
Yeah.
which I'll be honest with you, like I'm sure you're the same. Like I love it. I like being on the gym floor, doing the group
Mhm.
sessions, doing the classes. I'm actually a little bit croaky today because I did my guilty pleasure is the we call it Body 360. And it's basically just like a big circuit style class, but put the music on, shouting, loads of energy, really, really, really good. But from when you were first coaching at the start to kind of like where you're at now, what's kind of the differences in maybe the mindset around training, maybe for training women as well, but just in terms of kind of yeah, the difference on the gym floor with the clients that you're working with from when you first started.
I think when like weight training wasn't so mainstream back then, it was I mean, there were people I was training people and I had a full schedule and stuff, but like it wasn't like right now with social media, like you really see the push where like people are being told like, muscle is the longevity, like the biggest like marker of longevity. You got to build muscle, all that stuff. So it was very niche back then. It's still niche now, I think. Like most people don't weight train, but it's definitely become more popular. And I always like to talk about like if you go to a gym, like a regular commercial gym, like most of the gym space is cardio equipment, right? Like it's like 70% of the gym space is actually cardio equipment. So then you go into the weight training area, and most people don't have a trainer. So then, but then the people who do have a trainer, like we niche ourselves so far down to the people who actually see the value and and they benefit from the training is definitely a little bit different. But now with like social media, everybody thinks they can just do it on their own because they saw some influencer do something. So I mean, there's almost more education to be done with the average person, Gen Pop person, because they see a lot more like things that we wouldn't necessarily like we wouldn't recommend to people. Now they see it as opposed to before they just had no idea. So they would go into a gym and, you know, get a personal trainer, but now they think you can do it on their own because they follow some influencers like that they can do
Yeah,
this.
yeah, definitely. And why I asked that is because I think, and especially from what I've seen, and especially over here in Thailand, there is an influencer culture, which nothing wrong with that. We actually had before Christmas we had some influencers come over, and obviously it promotes the gym, it promotes the coaches. Like there's a lot of positives to that, but
Mhm.
looking at it from a client's point of view, and I think this flows quite nicely into kind of the topic that I sent over, or the topics sent over to chat about is we're in an era of like so much information and so much of like people saying, no, you need to do this if you want to do X, Y, or Z. And if you're not
Mhm.
doing this, you're going to be classed as X, Y, or Z. And I suppose the whole reason why people get involved in strength training, fitness, whatever it is. Number one is they probably enjoy it and they probably makes them feel good. But more
Mhm.
often than not, it's they want to be healthy, they want to feel good, they want to be fitter, they want to lose weight, X, Y, Z. And I suppose from your side, what uh, how do you communicate that with your clients in terms of what is healthy? Can you categorize what healthy is? And I suppose the bigger part of the question is where does that message kind of get lost and misinterpreted with clients looking at all this information and thinking, well, I don't do this, or does this make me unhealthy? Or I do this and I'm really healthy. What's kind of your take on that?
I mean, healthy is so individual, I think. That's the first thing I tell people. Like, I mean, there's basic markers, right? You do blood tests, there's certain things that you want to hit and stuff, but how do you get there is going to be very different from one person to the next. And then it changes as you get older, right? Like the things that you used to do in your 20s, you can't necessarily get away with in your 40s. And as a young trainer, I think back and how I was very harsh sometimes with my clients where, you know, they were like, well, I can't do this because, I have the kids and da da da. And like, I like to relax with maybe a glass of wine, whatever. And I'm like, no, if you want to be like, at this level, you want to be healthy, you want a certain body fat, like this is like, I was so like, I was kind of more siloed, I think. And then as I get older, I am like, oh, well, maybe I should have had a little bit more grace with with people as they get older. Because, we hear that all the time. It's like, oh, you can get better with every decade, or like I mean, if you start off like where you're not healthy, then maybe you can get better with decades. But like, let me tell you, as I've changed through every decade, it's like it takes a little bit more, more intention in the things that you do in order to maintain that. So, I mean, in terms of like what is healthy, it really is individual and what you're trying to do, but like, everybody has their preferences, everybody has like things that are non-negotiable, like just being like I said, what I was doing when I was in my 20s, telling my clients, like there was only one way. I was like, this is the only way that you can get there. But the truth is like you might have the optimal way, but then there's reality. Some people are willing to do certain things and some people aren't. So you got to work with who you have in front of you to make sure that they can really do all the things that will get them there.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah,
if
and 100%. I think you've got to. It's got to be the person that's in front of you. Whereas sometimes I would say some of the challenges that might come up, both from a client's point of view and also a coach's point of view, is especially now in terms of social media, online coaching. I would say maybe it's a little bit saturated, so people feel or coaches feel as though they need to say something that's going to grab people's attention, but
Mm.
sometimes that information is going to be misleading, and
Yeah.
maybe not um, being realistic in the expectations that they're setting their clients. And then from the client's point of view, because they're getting bombarded with
So many.
photographs,
Mhm.
the success, the tip of the iceberg in terms of what success is. It's kind of a battle against each other, to then find things that are going to be a lot more sustainable. How do you kind of approach that conversation with coaches or clients that you work with to kind of um, uh, change that battle, if you like, of trying to get something instant?
Yeah, I always say like it must be hard for like the average person to know what to do, right? There's always so much information out there and there's research to prove either side, right? Like, and the truth is always somewhere in the middle. And again, like just dealing with the person that you have in front of you. But I mean, I really do think that it's like educating them, like really like breaking it down, like the sound bites that you hear on social media are really, it's the things that are the most controversial that get all the attention. And people, if you're tribal, like if you're carnivore or you're vegan, there's like it's like people want you in their camp, and it's almost because it's easier to talk to one group than to talk to everyone, right? Like even when I was saying like I'm trying to niche down to like, women through different, stages of life because it's easier for me to create content that's a little bit more specific as opposed to I can do everything type of thing. And I think the people who really do go into that tribal mode, it's just catchy. It's just like easier and people like the controversy, like the algorithm likes, the debate. If you say something so extreme, then you get people like commenting and doing all those things. So, I mean, I typically tell my clients like if someone says an absolute, they're probably it's probably not accurate. It's probably not like there's no absolutes in the world. Like so that's kind of like, but it just takes time. It just takes time like coaching them, telling them, explaining it to them. And then, a lot with like, even in nutrition, it's like it's almost a little bit of trial and error. Like you have to, let's say you eat a certain way and then you change things and you see how the person does. Like you're always assessing to see how your client is doing on a certain program. Even with weight training, like you might have the best program, but if it's at the wrong time for this client and it's smashing them and they can't recover from it, then it's not a good program. Even if on paper it's a great program. So that's why, again, you just always have to assess the person in front of you, see what they can do, what they can recover from, and what makes them feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit like what you were saying there in terms of how your maybe thought process of working with clients would change. I know for me, how I was when I first started coaching and personal training is completely different now. The example that I always like to use, one of my very, very first clients was an ex-professional rugby player. And in
Mhm.
my head, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. And it basically turned out he used to train. I used to train him first thing on a morning, and he used to travel a lot with work. And in my head, this was going to be like the perfect program. It's going to be awesome. Whereas the fact that he used to come in early, get showered, and then go straight to drive wherever you needed to drive around the UK, we actually only had about maybe 40, 45 minutes to actually do it, to do a session. And it was a little bit
Mhm.
like he wanted to lift a little bit heavier because that made him feel good. He wanted to do a little bit of movement so he didn't feel stiff sitting in the car all the time, and he wanted to do a little bit of fitness so that he felt good. And it was like, all right, well, let's
You're like,
just
no, I want you to have a 400-pound squat. And you're
yeah,
like, nope.
absolutely. So it was and as well. At the time, I was what like 19, 20. He would have been in his maybe early 40s. Big bear of a man. So straight away, it was kind of like, all right, that's a quick learning curve. He wasn't shy to tell me what he thought, but I think that's that's how you learn. In terms of moving more kind of unpicking that phrase, what healthy is, and working with the client in front of you. Sometimes they can, like with anything, there's different ends of the spectrum that sometimes when you start working with a client, at the other end where they haven't done, maybe anything, they've got some like other habits, and it's kind of like how do we, implement change in there? And then there's the other side where people might have tried loads of different things, but they've got preconceived ideas of what they think is healthy. And how do you kind of in terms of those two different clients, kind of get them to a point where they're willing to try different things and have change within their lifestyles or training to fit that healthy for them. If that does that kind of make sense?
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's like you can't you can't do a massive overhaul on people. Like if you have someone who's been like who has a very like traditionally very unhealthy life, right? That doesn't like just eats whatever they want. They eat out a lot. They eat processed foods. They don't eat like, protein, vegetables, like the whole thing. Like you can't be like, all right, this is now you're going to eat like, only meat and vegetables and like, you know what I mean? It's like too much. It's like too much for the person. So I like to do like step by step. If you really want it to stick, you know? So in terms of nutrition, an example I have is like the food displacement. And I learned this like a long time ago from I can't remember who it was. Was it John Berardi? I think he used that term, food displacement. Like if you have a new client, they're eating whatever. The first thing, let's say if you want them to start eating protein, right? Well, don't remove anything from their diet. Just have them add protein to their diet. So one step at a time. So first thing, breakfast. Okay, let's add a little bit of protein here. You can still eat your cereal, whatever, as long as you get a little bit of protein. All right, you've mastered breakfast. Now let's do like, step by step. So you're really building like habits that they can maintain. And then just by adding, like, you want to go for the things that have the biggest impact in terms of how they feel. So, right. And, there's this really cool study that was done, especially like, I'm going to stay with the whole protein thing, is so they had, this was elementary school kids, and they put out one group, they were fed like a high protein breakfast. The other group was fed like cereal and toast or whatever. And then food was available to the kids for the rest of the day. So there was like traditionally healthy food and then just like kind of junk food. And the kids who had the high protein breakfast naturally made better choices throughout the day than the kids who ate like the high sugar breakfast. So the same, I use that philosophy in terms with my clients. Like if I want them to make better choices, well, I know that having protein for breakfast, that's like my biggest like pillar that I really, really want to start with them, then I do that. Because if they can't even do that one thing, there's no point in trying to give them all the supplements and give them like a crazy diet that they need to follow when they can't even do that one thing. It's like they got to earn the next step.
Yeah.
So you can't skip steps, I think, with a lot of the clients. So it's really like in terms of when you're dealing with like mostly Gen Pop people, this is what you do. But on the flip side, athletes eat horribly too.
Yeah.
People always think that, oh, well, it's Gen Pop, the athlete's going to be super motivated. The athlete is typically more motivated, yes, but they also have horrible habits. They're still very human. And because they're genetically gifted, sometimes they don't have to work as hard on their health as other people.
Um,
So, I mean, again, throughout the years, see athletes who, would eat like at a fast food restaurant 3 times a day. That was their food.
yeah.
So again, like trying to get them to change, it's like you have to change their palate too. Like they're so used to, highly processed, high sugar, high salt, and now you're asking them to eat like a plain piece of chicken and broccoli. It's going to
Yeah,
be a
yeah.
hard sell.
Absolutely. I always remember I worked with some professional rugby teams back in the UK, and I always remember there was some they were South Sea Islanders who had come over, and basically in pre-season they had to basically drop weight,
Hmm.
but then sometimes we'd catch them kind of like not sneaking off, but oh, I'm gonna go eat here, gonna eat there because they basically hadn't ate there before, and they just really enjoyed it. But they actually did end up dropping the weight. But as professional athletes, it's basically their job to train. So they're going to be out on the field, then they're going to be in the gym. Whereas general population, they're going to be sat down for X amount of hours if they're in an office job or something like that, and then they're only training maybe an hour, 3 hours a week, or however many times they go to the gym. In terms of kind of habits, and this is something that yeah I'd really like to hear your thoughts on, but this is conversations that I've had with clients myself is we're looking at their food, their training's really good, but their progress isn't where they want to be. And it's a case of, well, everything's home cooked. I cook everything from scratch. But equally it's kind of that thing of, well, just because it is all home cooked doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the healthiest thing. For example, my partner makes a really good chicken and mushroom pie. It's home cooked. It's from scratch. It is awesome. The calories are very high. And I'd say it's home cooked. What's kind of your thoughts on that? Is that something that has come up with clients that you've worked with? How do you
Absolutely.
kind of because there's a lot of information out there that says learning to cook is going to be a skill. The ingredients that are going to be in there. Like there's a lot of benefits to it, but I often feel that clients can sometimes struggle with, well, what do you mean
Yeah.
that's not as good? What's
I have a
kind of
funny
your
story
take on that?
before I get into that, and hopefully it illustrates this a little bit. This was a few years ago. I was dating this guy, and he loved to cook. And he was healthy. He had his own garden. He did like cook from scratch, like did all the things. And so he would cook me dinner every night, and it was awesome. But it was all, things from the garden. It was like super, whatever. And my weight like just crept up slowly, And I was like, this is crazy. Like, but I never paid attention to the way he was cooking. Or he was already done, and then anyway. So one time I'm there, and then like as he's cooking, I'm like watching him, and he's making this is the dinner. So it's like a piece of fish, salmon, but then he pours I don't know how much oil in the pan. So salmon is already fatty, which is fine, but then he cooks it in a bunch of oil, right? Cool. Then he makes a little aioli to go onto the salmon. So aioli, you got some, it's mayonnaise, you got oil in there, whatever. I'm like, all right. So he's putting a dollop of that, but it melts into it. So if I hadn't been there, I wouldn't have seen that that was an addition to the salmon. Then he starts making the salad. And he's making the vinegar. He's just pouring the oil on the salad. And then, so he has a tablespoon or a spoon, and then he's pouring it, and he's like, one, two, three. But it keeps pouring in between the things. So then I was like, is that how much oil you put in the salad every time? And then there's like avocado in the salad. I'm like, I probably just ate 100 grams of just fat that didn't need to be there. And I'm a nutritionist. I know this stuff, right? But like, you get carried away with things and then you think you're getting away with it until you see your weight creep up and you're like, wait a minute. I need to see what he's doing. And I think that's the biggest thing for clients. Like, because a lot of people know, like, oh, if they're trying to lose weight, they think, oh, I just cut out carbs. Okay. But if you're adding 100 grams of fat to each meal because you're cutting out carbs, it's just not like, you know, it's not working for you. So I mean, the fat, the hidden fats is like a big one, I think, for a lot of people. Like they think they're, oh, I'm eating healthy, but then, everything you're doing is like you're adding fats and it just like the bottom line, you have to know how many calories you're eating. If especially for people who like to eat, um, like I like to eat single ingredient type of foods, right? Like I have protein, I have like my salad, I know what vegetables I'm putting in there, but I'm not making like casseroles or like a pie or like things like that. So if it's not working, then you need to break it down to know exactly what you're consuming. And I know a lot of people don't like to track, but if you're stuck, you need to track because there's something that you're doing that's that's not allowing you to lose weight. Because if anyone that decides to fast, so let's say you're like, all right, we're gonna do I'm gonna fast for like 3 days. Everybody loses weight. So calories do matter. We know that if we decrease your calories, you will lose weight. So if you're not losing fat, weight, whatever you want to call it, then you're probably eating too many calories for what you're burning, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
But clients don't want to hear that. They're like, yeah, but I'm eating healthy. I'm doing this. I'm like, well, you're eating too many healthy things.
Yeah, I think that's really yeah, that's really interesting. I think especially when we building on that story that you said there, um the we got an air fryer long time ago, but when we were back in the UK. And I was always like, I'm never going to be that person who's got an air fryer. Be like, I've got an air fryer. Don't got an air
The air
fryer.
fryer is my favorite.
Oh, I got an air
Oh my God.
fryer, and then my whole life changed. And I became that guy that was like, yeah, you need to get the air
Everything
fryer.
in there.
Yeah, but in terms of how much less oil it was. And I think at the time I was competing more in powerlifting, and I basically had to cut weight for a powerlifting competition. It was so much easier. I'm not saying it was solely down to the air
Mhm.
fryer, but in
Yeah.
terms of things like that, like it's amazing how much just small changes it is. Similar to like when people are eating out, and there's oils or dressings or something like that. Sometimes just saying, just kind of have it on the side, and then at least then
Mhm.
that you
Yeah.
can control that a little bit a little bit more, because things like that can be the difference between success and being stuck where you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes on to when we're talking about progress, and if we're talking about fat loss, or gaining muscle, or whatever it is, or even kind of like health, and working towards that. um there's calories that we can track. We've mentioned there about weight on the scale, but sometimes that can only tell one story, if
More.
you like, because for
Mhm.
some people, and I literally had a conversation about this, was it today or yesterday? Had been in a calorie deficit for a really long time, and things had kind of just slowed down a little bit. So it's a case of, well, actually, what about if we just go into a little bit of a maintenance phase right now? Maybe
Mhm.
you've just been in that calorie deficit a little bit too long. Like going back to what you were saying, maybe sometimes you need to change something.
It changed.
So
Yeah.
what are kind of the other variables that you like to use to kind of measure success and see if things are going in the right direction? Because often it is just weight on the scale, or on the flip side of that, people will, when you're on about people don't want to track the food, I would say that, or I would like to think most people track their weights and it's just like, well, I'm just going to track my weights, I'm just going to track my cardio, and then everything else will take care of take care of itself. What other variables do you kind of track, and how do you communicate that with your clients?
I mean, I like to track, I mean, how they're like how hungry they are. Like there's a um like hunger, their mood, their sleep, their digestion, like all those things are like super important to track because again, it's the biofeedback. Basically, how are they doing on this plan? Like, are they, if they're eating so little calories and they've been on a deficit for so long, but then they don't have, they're not sleeping well and they're not motivated, they're not training. They're probably not training as hard as they could. So they're the downstream effect of so many, like there's so many downstream effects that we can track that we know that will have a bigger impact. So if you're trying to and again, so that person that's been in a calorie deficit for so long and has been doing it for it's like training, right? Like we periodize our training, we change the exercises, we change the reps, the sets, the volume, we do all those things. But then when it comes to nutrition, people think that they can do the same thing and then like, well, I'm eating low calories, so it should work and I'm going to do it until it works. Well, it's not working. But but on top of that, on top of just the weight, like I really like the in body. I don't know if you guys have, the
Yeah,
bioelectrical impedance and stuff. There's, and I came up in the era of like Charles Poliquin, so we were doing the calipers and this and that. And I learned to do the calipers even before in university. I learned to do the calipers and I was pretty good at it. And then I taught like, the bio sig. So I did like, I had a lot of reps. I've trained a lot of people. Then, and it's still it's really hard for people. And even for people, like when you're doing it on your client, like it doesn't mean a whole lot to them. Like for us, it means something. But like what I like about the in body is that it's so objective, right? Like, even if they're inflamed, even if they're like, it just makes it like they get a printout. People like seeing a printout. And then it's easy to see, what their skeletal muscle is doing, like all the different parameters, how much visceral fat they have. I feel like that, I mean, ideally, if you can have that as opposed to just doing their weight, is they get that visual, so it makes it like even and then it makes it easier for them to understand how different things changing their diet in their diet can have a big impact on their in body.
yeah,
And again, like the in body, of course, there's a margin of error. You have to make sure that, you set it up properly, that they're doing it the same day every week, that they haven't eaten or they've eaten water, blah, 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 all those things. But it's still like you can see the trend. The trend, I think, is easier for people to see. So yeah, like so when someone's on like a journey like to lose body fat or whatever, like I try not to only focus on one thing. Like I'm trying to really make them like I still want them to feel good. I don't want them to feel like shitty all day. But you also have to make them understand that it's okay to be a little bit hungry, but you shouldn't be starving because if you're starving, you're going to make bad decisions.
yeah.
So it's like a balancing act of like there's different things that we're looking at and there's different ways to measure success than just like the weight on the scale. So I
Yeah,
just try to like reinforce that a lot with them. And it's funny because when I was competing in fitness, so this was again in the 90s, early 2000s, like I never measured my body fat. I never even looked at my weight. I mean, it was just like a visual thing. Like my coach would look at me, okay, well, we need to do this, this, this. Okay, well, whatever you've been doing, we're getting this result. Now we want a different result. We got to change it. Like sometimes, like, with all the technology is really cool, but like in the end, like the simple things all often still work.
100%. Again,
Yeah.
a similar conversation I had. I think again it must have been yesterday, and it was kind of basically we've got an ice bath at Titan, and we were talking about recovery, and sometimes the thing of the best things that can actually help are free. Like go to
Yeah.
sleep, go for a walk in
Yeah.
terms of recovery. Like in terms of and don't get me wrong, to a certain extent, I do like numbers and that sort of stuff. I don't have a Whoop band. I don't actually track my steps or anything like that unless it's on my phone. But there's a lot of
Mhm.
things that can do that, and a lot of people, and they are useful. And I do use that with clients. But sometimes it's the case of just that question of when a client's coming into the gym, how are you feeling today?
Yeah.
How's the body feeling? Because exactly going back to what you were saying, you can still be on track and feel good, but you could actually be on track and feel awful. Do you know what I
Yep.
mean? So going back to the start, if you like, again referring it back to kind of that word health. Do you
Mhm.
think that, health plays a part in terms of mindset? And it's kind of like if you're willing to, be open to change, try different things, track more than one thing, because that's another thing that I completely agree with you on. I'm a big fan of analogy, and I'll always say it's a little bit like from before competing in powerlifting, I played a lot of rugby. So it's like if you only had one game in a season and you lost that game, that's it, your season over. Whereas like you
Yeah.
could play 10 games, lose
Mm.
two, but win eight, that's probably quite a successful season. So
Yep.
you haven't gone too far wrong. So what's kind of your thoughts on, the mindset side of things and how that, impacts health, decision making, and actual progress, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, that's the perfect thing, like analogy that you said with the games lost and won. I like to do the same thing with like meals with clients, right? Like if you can get 80 to 90% of your meals right, then you'll progress. But I never, and again, this is something like I've grown into, right? When I was young, I'm like 100%, you got to be 100% good. You got to do all the things. But then it's almost too much. Like it's like for most people, they don't, and that life isn't like that. That's like, again, the mindset thing is like life ebbs and flows. So your nutrition is going to have to ebb and flow with it. But it's like how you recover from it and how you don't let one meal that's off derail the whole weekend. Like if you if you mess up one time, then people are like, I already messed up, then I'll just continue. So like in terms of little tricks, like most people struggle with weekends, right? They're really, really good during the week, but then the weekend starts on Friday and then they start like, eating more, they're drinking more, they're making bad decisions. And then when they drink more, then they're more hungry. Like all these inhibitions are like kind of so it's really kind of changing the mindset to be like the weekend, like it depends what your goal is. Are you trying to have long-term health where you want to allow for things like that. So when you are having this social event and you're going out, you can do it guilt-free as opposed to being so stressed about it. And then if you have one thing that's off, then you're like, well, the whole week is shot. And then you mess up 3 days instead of just one meal. So in terms of, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but in terms of health, I think it's really telling your client that it's not, perfection is not required, you know? But 80 to 90% is will get you there. So if you're good for 80 to 90% of the year, you'll have a significant change in your health. But if you go 8 weeks, 100%, and then you go four, and then you're tired of it, so 4 weeks you mess up, then it's almost you're not at 80%, you're at like 40, 50% of the year that you were good, so it's like really just teaching them the numbers of that. Like if you allow yourself a little bit of like even daily, some people, like if you allow them to have a little whatever, if it's a sweet thing or something that they like, if they can have like a little piece of chocolate every day, it's better to do that for them than to allow them one day where they're going to cheat and they're going to, blow through their calorie deficit in one day. Do you know what I mean? So again, it's just like teaching them like I mean, again, somewhere in the middle. Like we gotta find, we gotta ebb and flow with life, and it's the same thing with nutrition when you're looking for your health, like long term. And again, it's the same thing with training too. Like, are you gonna anyone can do a really, really hard program and you can smash your clients for like 4 weeks. Let's say they have a wedding, they can do that, but it's not sustainable. So again, like always go for the long haul. Like even when, with Keela, when you periodize, you're always looking for, a 12 week, a year, a 4 year cycle. Like you're always looking ahead, but it's the average of what you do that's going to have the biggest impact on your health.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I did answer that question there because it is that thing of people either want to like a firework just go straight off and go all guns blazing, whereas actually and it's kind of you know boring if you like, but the biggest thing that's the best clients that I've had, I'm sure you're the same as well, are the ones that stay consistent and just stay and
Yep.
just keep going over it. Again, I said I'm a big fan of an analogy. If you're on a motorway, there are going to be times where you're stuck in traffic in the outside lane crew going down, but as long as you're consistently moving, that's okay. Whereas, yeah, if you're in the outside lane trying to go as fast as you can all the time, that's when people have accidents and
Yep.
fall off. And as long as you're staying within those parameters, sometimes you might veer to one side compared to the other. And I think that's only natural in terms of a client's kind of like lifespan where they might want to try and, push their body fat percentage down to something lower that they've not done before, which might, some people might argue, anytime that you commit to a goal like that, or using myself as an example as powerlifting, sometimes there's an element of becoming unhealthy at the sacrifice of doing something else. However, at least if you can still always come back to that middle ground and not go too far, and then keep everything within touching distance, it's not kind of the end of the world. Um,
It's like when, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, no, go on.
So it's like when I was competing for fitness, I've lived through it like where for 12 weeks you're doing like extreme like and by the way, anything bodybuilding is not healthy. Like for we know this, but a lot of people like are like you don't do that because you're trying to get healthy. Like it's not healthy. But extreme dieting, extreme training for like 12 weeks. And then sure, you look amazing that one day. That one day you look amazing on stage. You get all the pictures that you want. But then what happens? Like the body always wants to rebound. So then so actually during that time that I competed, those 3 to 4 years was probably the unhealthiest of my whole life because I would get super, super lean, like single digit lean, and then I'd rebound, I'd gain 30, 40 pounds. And then I was like, you feel horrible. So mentally that affects you. And then I'm like, okay, well, I've gained all this weight back. Now, bam, I need to do another competition to get back. And yo-yoed all those years. And it's really when I decide, well, and then it shot my metabolism. Like I was just like, my body was so out of whack. It took me like 5, 6 years to recover. Like even just mentally, just, you don't feel good about yourself. You've gained all this weight. I felt achy, like my blood values were all over the place. But really, when I started to do I'm doing it for the long haul. I'm not dieting hard. I'm just eating consistently and being consistent week to week, year to year. Then that's where I finally got to a spot where like I don't diet. Like people, even now, people are like, "Oh, but you're always." I'm not dieting. Like if I go out with my friends, I'll have a cocktail, I'll have French fries. I just posted all that. But like again, I'm just consistent from week to week, year to year, and I know. I've tracked, I've done all those things. I can look at a piece of, protein and know how many grams of how much it weighs and stuff. So but you have to put in the work at first in terms of like the tracking thing. But like yeah, so basically my whole story is like when you do the extremes, like if you're extreme here, then you're gonna it goes back and forth. It's like a roller coaster, so you want to be as
Absolutely.
steady as possible.
Yeah, it's that phrase. I can't I can't remember who told me or where this or where I got this from. But yeah, anything that goes up has to come back down.
Must come
Anytime that
has to come
there's a spike, and yeah, again, I can't remember where I got this from. But if you do crazy things are going to
down.
happen. Whereas actually, it's like just putting savings in a saving account. It's just going to top up, just keep going and build up from there. Yes, there's
It's like
opportunity.
gambling,
Yeah,
right? You can make a lot of money gambling, but you can lose a lot of money gambling too. When
absolutely.
you're
Definitely.
yeah,
Quite a lot of topics and tangents spoken about there today, Alexandra, but really, really enjoyed chatting with you today.
I
For
did too.
everyone listening and for everything that we've spoken about today, what would be your take home points or words of wisdom from everything that we've chatted about today?
My words of wisdom, I mean, I think it kind of goes back to like, life happens somewhere in the middle. Like just be able to ebb and flow with the river, like, but don't go to the extremes. And you want to be healthy for life, so then it's something that you need to do for life. So never think that you're going to do something really extreme for a little short period of time to get a lifelong, healthy life.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know. That wasn't a great one.
Yeah. No, I think everything we've spoken about because I know there's that phrase, isn't there? People know what to do. It's just doing it. Whereas I do genuinely believe that there is so much information out there, and it's kind of like, well, what category do I fall in? What or people are always looking for a category, which it's not the end of the world. It's a little bit like we've had a group come over from Switzerland to Titan for the last couple of weeks, and they're very much like we're CrossFitters. This is this is what they do. However, they've still been open to, doing some different classes. They haven't just come and doing the CrossFit classes. And that's the thing of, if you're open to kind of like, if you're not tied to one modality, one train of thought, all of a sudden it kind of I don't know whether this is the right phrase, but it kind of like just reduces that stress a little bit or pressure to be like, right, well, I need to do this. Well, I'm doing a bodybuilding program, so I need to be at this body fat percentage. But actually, I really enjoy doing this. All right, cool. Well, you can do both and just find somewhere where it's going to be in the middle. Um, but no, I thought that was a really, really interesting chat there, Alexandra. For everyone listening who might have any questions about what we've spoken about today, want to reach out to you, see the content and information that you put out there, where can people find you or reach out to you?
Instagram is my main social media. So it's at alexandra.bernardin is just my full name. Yeah, that's the easiest way to, I'm working on a website. I'm working on all those things, but like for now, the easiest place to find me is like send me a DM or something on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on today, Alexandra. Really enjoyed chatting with you today. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will catch you all at the next episode.